Good morning, all distinguished members of the faculty and management of. I'm not quite sure whether I should say Krea University or IFMR GSB, but whichever one it is, uh, greetings to all of you. Greetings to second year students of the MBA program, but most especially to the incoming MBA class of 2023. Uh, I'm at once delighted and honored to share this virtual stage, not only with friends, but also very distinguished members of the board and faculty whom I've had the honor of interacting with, albeit briefly, uh, Professor Sundaram Swami, Professor Mahesh Rangarajan in a very different avatar, and Ram, of course, is an old friend, as is Krishnan. So it's nice to be among friends uh, on an occasion as special and magical as the beginning of the journey for all the new students of IFMR GSB. Uh, First of all, let me also add my words of congratulations to all of you, because I think, as Professor Das said, uh, you are truly the chosen few, right? From a large pool of aspirants, the select few of you have actually made it to the class of 23. So congratulations and all the very best as you start on this exciting new journey. I believe I have about 20 minutes, so I'll try and pick some of the things I thought that are important to share with you. First and foremost, uh, I think I've been a lifelong student of the English language, but I don't know if I have heard the words extraordinary, unprecedented, uncertain, volatile used more in in the past 60 years as compared to perhaps the last 12 or 15 months. I think in many ways these words kind of uh, signify the world that we live in, right? More than anything else. Of course, there's opportunity, there is excitement, there's all of those things, but I think these words really, in many ways, sum up the state of the world today, the state of our country, our economy, and indeed our own lives. So, make what you will of it, but this is, I think, reality as we see it. And what's more, this more or less threatens to be the reality, at least for the next few years. I hope not for long, but certainly I think in the very near and foreseeable future, I think these words will define the state of the world and the state of our lives. So this is more or less a given. And in many ways, this is the world that all of you, as incoming students of the MBA class, are stepping into. I'm the one thing that struck me, and I said to Ram, even though I was told that my session was at 9:45, I was keen to log in at the very beginning just to understand, what the tone and tenor of the proceedings today were going to be. And the one thing that struck me, listening to all the eminent speakers who went before me, there was roughly 45 minutes of it. And I was thinking, this is an orientation induction program for business school, and yet I heard virtually nothing that you would expect to hear in an induction program for an incoming business school class. I did not hear anything by way of hard numbers or facts. Instead, I heard people talk about compassion, I heard people talk about humility, about the environment, sustainability, about being remembered for what you left behind. And I found this, A, quite surprising, but also extremely delighted that here is a university, here is an institution which clearly privileges humanity, humanitarianism, and compassion above the hard grind of business, numbers, bottom lines, ratios, and whatnot, which is typically what you would expect in an incoming class or an outgoing class for that matter in a business school. So I found that very refreshing, but also something that touched me very deeply. I, as you've been told, was privileged to serve an organization for the best part of my working life, which stood for and continues to stand for ethicality above all else. The visionary founder of Sundaram Finance, Mr. T.S. Santhanam, who is a legend in these parts and certainly in the financial services world, his motto always was, give back to the communities that you serve. And this is something that he initiated, what was it, 70 years ago, right? When things like CSR and governance, none of these buzzwords was really in currency then. But in his vision, this is what Mr. Santhanam saw, which was really behind the founding of Sundaram Finance. Actually, the story goes, and it's not a story, this is actually what I've heard from him. Sundaram Finance was founded when a customer of then the TVS group one day walked into Mr. Santhanam's room and said, Mr. Santhanam, the TVS group is a wonderful corporate entity. You sell vehicles, you service vehicles, you build bodies for our buses, you retread our tires, you sell parts for our automobiles, you insure them. Why then have you left out the most important part of what we need? And Mr. Santhanam was taken aback and he said, what is that missing piece? To which apparently this customer said, finance, which is really the lifeblood for business. Why have you thrown us to the loan sharks of this world? And apparently Mr. Santhanam was very struck by what this customer said, and thereby Sundaram Finance was born. And we live today in a world where financial inclusion is very much the buzzword. Back in the day, the buzzword did not exist. But in Mr. Santhanam's heart, I think he understood financial inclusion, because that's really who Sundaram Finance started off as, and that's who we are to this day. 66 years on, we're still about financial inclusion. Our customers then, as now, were largely semi-literate, sometimes illiterate, truck owners, bus owners, small businesses. Many of them did not have bank accounts. Several of them couldn't sign their names. They used what in Tamil we call kainate. In Hindi, you would say anguta chap. These were our customers, and I'm proud to say even today, though a smaller proportion of them, they still, would fit some of these descriptions, right? So that's where our journey began, and we've stayed true to that idea. The reason I'm giving you this background is only because, I felt such a deep connect, as I said, with what some of the earlier speakers spoke of. Yes, business school prepares you for the grind of, business. It prepares you for the grind of corporate life. But I think underlying all of this, I think we all need to be good human beings. We always needed to be, but I think now more than ever, I think the imperative of humanitarianism, of compassion, of caring, I think have taken on a completely different dimension. And to that extent, I'm, as I said, really delighted that here is an institution which seems to privilege and prioritize this thinking. So I guess it's in order to congratulate the people who are behind the vision of Krea and indeed the business school at IFMR GSB. So what I thought I'd do, with your permission, is not talk so much about business. I didn't know that this would be the flow, but what I'd sort of thought of sharing with you, I think it's presumptuous, even pompous to advise anyone in this day and age. What I thought instead is I would do is share some of my learnings as I've gone through life, as I've gone through 40 something years of being a corporate manager. I've been a lifelong student. I continue to be a student, but there's some key lessons that I've learned, which, as I said, with your permission, I'd like to share with you. And I start with Dr. Rangarajan talked about a book that he'd read. I too recall a book that I'd read many, many years ago. This is by a very well-known author, Eric Siegel, who's better known for his love story, but he actually wrote a number of other wonderful works of fiction. One of them was called Doctors. It's about the Harvard graduating class of Harvard Medical School. And the book begins in the prologue with the dean of the Harvard Medical School walking into this classroom, and there were 30 odd young aspiring doctors, just like many of you today, except that they were doctors, not business students. They were all there, the brightest and the best, aspiring to become, changers of the world. And the dean walks in, greets all of them, turns around, picks up a piece of chalk and writes the number 26 on the board. And everyone's kind of flummoxed. What's this old man doing? Why is he writing number 26 on the board? And, obviously there's surprise, there's stunned kind of silence. Then he turns around and says, can any of you guess what the significance of this number 26 is? And obviously, no one knows the answer. And then he says, 26 is the number of diseases to which medical science has answers. The rest, my dear friends, is just guesswork, right? I will leave you with these humbling thoughts. And the dean walks out of the room. Now, I'm not suggesting that you know the answers to only 26 of any problem, finance or otherwise, but I'm only laying this as the basis for what I thought I'd share with you. The first of which is that the sum total of what any human being knows, right? Whether it's someone like me who's spent 40 years or more in corporate life, or it's freshers who are joining the program today. This is true for all of us in between as well, that the sum total of what we know is a minuscule fraction of what we don't know. Right? This might seem like a very simplistic statement, but if you think about it, it's true. Try and make a list of all the things that you know. You will probably fill a few pages of a notebook. Try and make a list of all the things that you don't know. I would argue that would run into a few notebooks at least. And this is important only as a realization in the first step towards humility. And I have learned through my life that humility is perhaps the mother of all virtues. Right? We talk about lots of virtues. We've been taught as we've grown up by our parents, our teachers, by well-wishers about various virtues. But I can say to you in all honesty that humility is probably the mother of all virtues. Why? Because humility, it is that allows us to listen to another point of view, a different point of view, even sometimes an unacceptable point of view. But humility allows us to listen, and unsurprisingly, listening is the thing that opens the door to all learning. Right? Therefore, to me, one of the big lessons that I learned through my life was this, that in order for one to learn, one must be willing to listen, right? And that can only come if one has the humility to realize that what we know is actually very little. As accomplished as all of us are, as well qualified as all of us are, as much we've been toppers in school and college, as much as we've come through this grueling selection process to be here today, with all of that, what we know is still, the analogy of 26 diseases. That's it, right? So that's learning number one. Corollary to that is that learning is a lifelong journey. Learning did not stop when you graduated. It will not stop when you step out with your MBA. It will not stop when you become CEO. It will not stop till you stop breathing. Right? Learning is truly a lifelong journey. I'm so proud to say that each day I wake up, I learn something new. Right? And this is the wonderful thing about learning, because in our traditional mindsets, when we were growing up, we always thought of learning as something that came from our teachers, from our elders, so on and so forth. But my life has taught me that you learn from everyone. In fact, I'd love to say this. Today, my biggest teachers are my children. Right? They're young adults, no doubt, but they're still my children. And they today are my biggest teachers. And what I've learned also is that we learn from the rich and the powerful, but equally from the poor and the meek. As I said, many of our customers were so-called illiterate, but the wisdom of life which they taught me is invaluable. No business school would have ever taught me those lessons. These are lessons from the street. These are lessons from the world. And I'm eternally indebted to them for those lessons. So the learning here is that every person, however humble, has a story to tell. And in each of those stories, there is a lesson to be learned. And here's the other thing about learning. And again, these are things which life has taught me, which business has taught me. Learning is often about what we should do, right? We're often told, do this, do that. But it is equally true that learning is so often about what we should not do. lots of times we miss out on that learning. Learning is a lot about what not to do, what to avoid, how not to be. For example, when we meet vexatious people, when we meet loud and aggressive people, rather than hate them or despise them, it's useful to tell yourself, this is one person I don't want to be. This is a role model that I do not want in my life, right? So, as I say, learning is as much about what not to do. Number three, and this is probably strange coming from a guy who's in one way or the other managed money for the large part of my life. But I think it is that which also taught me that money does not buy the really important things in life. Think about love. Think about friendship. Think about trust. Think about respect. Money does not buy any of these things, right? It's so obvious, but we often miss this. Money does not buy these things. On the other hand, if we consider these things as being truly the important things in life, then we must remember that we have to earn these, right? Unlike the material possessions, unlike the technological gadgets, which will become obsolete in no time, these things, love, friendship, trust, respect, these riches stay with us throughout our lives. These are the treasures, and this resonates very strongly, as I said, with many of the things which the earlier speakers said. What will we be remembered for? We are not going to be remembered for our wealth or our net worth statements. We will be remembered for the impact that we had on other people's lives. Did we make a difference to even one more human being, howsoever humble, right? I think that is what will matter finally. And as I say, money doesn't buy any of those things. Staying with money, one of the things which, we've all seen in our lives, unfortunately, through some of the unsavory things that have happened, mostly in the world of finance, but also in other spheres of the corporate world, there's this terribly toxic and dangerous philosophy, which I sort of describe as the doctrine of at any cost. You often hear people say, I don't care. I need this at any cost. Or the more common Indian expression of, I don't care, by hook or by crook, I want this done. I believe that this is a very dangerous and, as I said, very toxic philosophy, not only in business, but even in life. I think this doctrine of at any cost is something, I said I would not advise, but I will make an exception, and I would, if not advise, at least urge all of you, please shun this philosophy. Success is important, right? We're all here to better ourselves, to better the lives of our families, to better the lives of our communities, to get ahead, right? To succeed in conventional measures of that word. But please let not this quest for success ever drive you to this philosophy of at any cost. There is a cost. Everything has a cost, and certain costs, certain types of costs are unacceptable. I don't care what, right? And I'm not saying that that is an absolute line. That is a line that each one of us draws for ourselves. But please do not embrace this doctrine of at any cost, hook or by crook. No. It's important to succeed, but it is important to succeed within the bounds of ethicality, within the bounds of doing the right thing. Because let me add this, you may not, many of you are probably too young to realize this, but I can tell you with the benefit of experience, and I'm sure people who are closer to my age will bear with me on this. There is nothing more beautiful and pleasurable than when your head hits the pillow and you're asleep in next to no time, right? And this comes from a clear conscience. This comes from knowing that you've lived your life well. This comes from knowing that you've not had to, pardon the French, you've not had to screw somebody to get ahead in your life, right? That, the value of that is immeasurable, right? So please, as I say, in all of your quest to get ahead, to succeed, to be the best, you must have all of those aspirations, but not at any cost, right? This is something that I would ask all of you to take to heart, because from everything that I've heard, Krea seems to espouse this as a value, as an ideal. So please do carry this with you. The other lesson that I've learned is that leadership, and all of you, most of you will go on to become leaders in your own right. Leaders of business, leaders of industry, leaders of non-profits, I don't know what, but leaders. Nevertheless, you've all come here to be trained to be leaders. And leadership is about recognizing that people are made differently from one another. If you take any team, you will find a mix of excellent, average, sometimes even a few below average people, right? This is life, right? This is a reflection of life. As you look around you, this is true of the world in general. The leader's ability, therefore, lies in being able to get the best out of each one of these people, whatever may be his or her best. If we had only gold medalists working for us, we would be redundant, right? This is a lesson I learned from my guru, Mr. G.K. Raman in Sundaram Finance. He often told me that. If I went to him and complained that somebody wasn't good enough, he'd say, "Why are you here for? If you just surrounded yourself with gold medalists, then I don't need you, because the gold medalist will do the job. I have you here. I chose you so that you would draw the best in every person on your team. When you've done that, then you have earned yourself the right to be a leader." And this is a lesson I've not forgotten. He told me this, I don't know, 30 years ago, but this is a lesson which has stayed with me to this day, right? So recognize that you will have to deal with different levels of ability of your team members, but you as a leader have the task of getting the best out of each one of them. I think I'm running close on time, so let me quickly wind up. This is again a life lesson which I've learned, which has stayed with me. Nice guys do not finish last. Don't let anybody let you believe that nice guys finish last. They don't. The most recent example, New Zealand in the WTC. The nicest bunch of guys. I was saying to somebody, if India had to lose to someone that I'd be happy with is New Zealand. I would have hated it if we had lost to Australia or England. But losing to New Zealand was fine. They're the nice guys. Rahul Dravid, the greatest gentleman you'd ever hope to meet. He didn't finish last. So don't let people lead you to believe that aggression and abrasiveness are the keys to success in your career or in your life. Not true. Humility, gentleness, fairness, these are the things that we remember great people for. The pages of history are full of examples of great people whom you remember for these qualities: humility, gentleness, fairness, not for aggression, not for abrasiveness. Those are not prerequisites to be a successful manager, much less a successful and happy human being, right? And to finally, to kind of amplify on what Professor Sundaram said. One of the nicest things, and this is my experience, one of the nicest things in life is to have people come and thank you for something that you did for them, but you have no recollection of, right? But then suddenly walk up to you and say, my life changed because of something you did, or you helped my child get admission somewhere and he is now a hotshot in Google or Microsoft. You're saying, what? I don't remember this. So the lesson from this is always remember the help that other people have done to you, but forget the things that you have done for others. Right? I think is really, in a way, what Sundar was talking about. I endorse that entirely. In fact, I for many years, the tagline in my email, I don't know what it's called, I call it tagline. It reads, what we do for ourselves dies with us. What we do for others remains and is immortal. That's sort of the tagline I have at the end of my emails. I don't know, these are not my original words. I saw them somewhere and I incorporated it in my mail. But, I think that's a lovely thought, whoever, God bless him. I think really we'll all be measured by, that one thing. What did we make a difference to the lives of at least one other human being? And ideally, another human being who is less fortunate than us. So I apologize because I think overshot my time by a little bit. But thank you so very much for having me here today. As I said, congratulations. This is the beginning of a super exciting journey. And I do hope and pray that each one of you, boys and girls, will go on to become great leaders, that you will change the face of this great country. I sometimes wish, as Ram said, I wish I too were a student. I wish I were part of this MBA class, because there is so much that this world has to offer, and there is so much that each one of you can do to make India truly proud, right? And to reclaim our place as one of the greatest, not nations, but one of the greatest cultures and civilizations that this world has ever seen. You have that unique opportunity. So my very best wishes to you, my prayers for all of you to become great leaders, great game changers for India. Thank you once again, Krea. Thank you, Ram, for having me here today. God bless you all. Stay safe and take care.